I'm gonna try to reshare again, guys. I'm having some issues, so give me just a second. Let's try this again. We're having the same issue I had last time where I'm not getting any notes. We may have to just go without, guys. We may have to just.
Do you need to send it to me and let me drive it?
Here we go. I think this may be it. You can grab it out of the comms folder, Hannah, if you want. And maybe, I might let you drive it.
Okay.
You might be okay. I mean, most of this presentation is going to be by Rachel and Matt. So, Hannah, let's just go ahead and go without it. I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay. Just get my screen organized here. Okay, guys. My apologies. It's been very chaotic this morning, so I apologize that you're joining and I'm unorganized, but I am glad that you are here. Welcome to McKinney-Vento and ARP Homeless Quarterly Call. This morning we have some special guests from Arroyo. I always struggle saying that name, so I apologize. We have Rachel and Matt, and I will turn it over to them as it comes to their part of the webinar today. But I do appreciate your time and joining. We're going to talk about migrant students today, specifically when it comes to supporting them and homeless students. So the program purpose, we're going to talk about that this morning. We're going to talk about the McKinney-Vento definition. Then I'll let the migrant program take over, and then we'll talk about program supports and resources, and we'll leave time for questions. So I know a lot of you already know McKinney-Vento and the program, but to do a quick overview for maybe those who are newer to programming. The purpose of the Education for Homeless Children and Youth Act is to ensure that each child, homeless youth, have access to the same free, appropriate public education, including a public preschool education as provided to other children and youth. So the definition under McKinney-Vento is children or youth who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, including children that are sharing the housing of other persons due to living in sharing housing of other persons, living in hotels, motels, trailer parks, or campgrounds, living in emergency or transitional housing, or abandoned hospitals, living in public or private places not designed for or regularly used as a sleeping accommodation, living in cars, parks, public spaces, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, bus or train stations, or similar settings, and who are migratory children living in the above circumstances. As you can see on the side over there, we have the key definitions: fixed, regular, and adequate. That is not in the statute. That is just something that you can look at when you're considering the definition if it applies to the family that you're working with. So unaccompanied homeless youth, they need to meet two definitions in order to be able to be considered McKinney-Vento unaccompanied homeless youth. One, they have to meet the definition. We just went over that: fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and cannot be in the custody of a parent. So if they are in the physical custody of a parent, then they would not meet both of those terms in order to be McKinney-Vento. So they need to be homeless and meet the definition, and without a legal guardian or parent in order to be McKinney-Vento. It's not to say that you cannot work with a student to be able to get an aunt or someone to help them get a power of attorney or guardianship. But as far as enrollment, the student must meet the definition to be eligible for services under McKinney-Vento. So we're looking at the EHCY definition of English learner. It's important to remember that when you're working with students, sometimes, not always, you're going to have migrant families and immigrant families who are going to be English learners. Again, that's not always the case, but just the law defines EL as an individual who is age 3 to 21, who's enrolled in or preparing to enroll in elementary school or secondary school, who is not born in the United States, or whose native language is language other than English, who's Native American or Alaskan Native or Native resident of other outlying areas, and who comes from an environment where language other than English has had a significant impact on the individual's level of English language proficiency, or who is migratory, whose native language is a language other than English, and who comes from an environment where a language other than English is dominant. So other definitions to remember, or your immigrant definition, again, migrant, immigrant are different definitions, and sometimes that gets confusing when we're looking at these special populations. Immigrant is an individual who moves to another country and plans to live there permanently. A refugee is an individual who has fled their home country due to fear of prosecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. An asylee is a refugee who's in the U.S. during the initial immigration process. Then an unaccompanied minor is a youth under the age of 18 who has come to the U.S. territory state without an unaccompanied parent or guardian. So the term unaccompanied in the context refers to immigration status, not the McKinney-Vento status. And then unaccompanied homeless youth, as defined by McKinney-Vento, children or youth who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So again, just because they're coming in as unaccompanied minor does not mean they're going to meet the definition of McKinney-Vento. So for migrant children and unaccompanied youth, many migrant children and youth are more than likely going to fit the McKinney-Vento definition. Again, it's not every family, but a majority of them probably are going to be a migrant and eligible for McKinney-Vento. Migrant recruiters should work with the homeless liaison and this LEA MEP program to ensure that all rights and services are provided through McKinney-Vento. So it's not just the homeless liaison's responsibility; it's a team effort to ensure that migrant students are getting the same immediate enrollment and all the services that they're entitled to under the federal law. And of course, the McKinney-Vento Act provides rights to access educational services. So while we might on the front end have immediate enrollment, we also got to make sure that transportation is set up. Again, in timely manner, transportation, you all know, is 1 to 2 days from enrollment. And so if a family is living in a vehicle and that vehicle is not able to get them to the school, then you need to get a bus or some other means of transportation until a more permanent transportation can be set up for the family. And then, of course, you want to make sure you have collaboration between your migrant program there at the LEA and your homeless education staff. Again, it can't just be all on the homeless liaison or all on the migrant program. It needs to be a collaboration so that everyone's working together to make sure all services are provided. So with that said, we have had in Tennessee a lot of migrant families who have come into Tennessee and have been placed throughout the state. And so there's been some concerns of lack of immediate enrollment / maybe when Arroyo is coming out and saying like, hey, we verified this student as McKinney-Vento. And the homeless liaison / enrollment staff is like, well, that's not enough information. Like we have to do our own verification. Arroyo has been passed and it has federally been allowed to identify a student under McKinney-Vento. They've been trained to do McKinney-Vento identification through things with me, through the National Center for Homeless Education. And so more than likely when they're coming to the school to help the liaison or the enrollment staff, more than likely they're pretty spot on about identifying a student that's eligible for McKinney-Vento. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel and Matt from Arroyo, who are going to kind of explain their role and give you a little bit more information about how you can support your migrant students that are McKinney-Vento. Okay,
that's great.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Yeah, as I kind of pull up slides here, we'll just take a second to introduce ourselves. My name is Matt Flaherty. I help lead the outreach and enrollment team for the Tennessee Migrant Education Program. Rachel, you want to do a quick intro?
Yes, thank you, Matt. So my name is Rachel Jackson, and I oversee services from pre-K through 12th grade for the Migrant Education Program across the state.
Great, thanks, Rachel. All right, just to confirm, can we see the slide up here now, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
There's
Great.
Hannah,
yeah.
but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to start just with a quick introduction to the migrant education program. We're going to do a little kind of role play activity. Rachel and I are going to act out a common scenario that we see with migratory families enrolling in school and some challenges there. And then we're going to take some time to debrief from that scenario, talk about what we have seen throughout the state. And then we also have Catherine Knowles from Metro Nashville. She's going to share a little bit about her experience, with the migrant education program, with McKinney-Vento, and the coordination between all these programs to support families in Metro Nashville. So really excited about that. But just first, the migrant education program, what is it? It's a federal education program, Title I, Part C. It was founded to support the migratory farm worker community for that travels across the country to feed the country essentially. You can kind of see where Tennessee is on this map. They call it an eastern stream. There are many families that move from Florida to Georgia to Tennessee, even further north, and they do this every year. It's like a migrant seasonal pattern. That's just one picture of a migrant family, but we have all kinds of migrant families that have lived in Tennessee for years and years. We have migrant families that move from other countries. But this is kind of the foundation, is that families, children are moving so often. And with moving so often comes changing schools, oftentimes substandard housing, which I think this group will be familiar with. So this is like the foundation of the program, is to support the migratory farm worker and the migratory fisher community throughout the country and ensure their children, have access to free public education. So like I said, it's authorized under Title I, Part C, Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Most recently, Every Student Succeeds Act. Every state, gets a formula grant based on how many, migratory children there are, how many migratory children we help. And again, it ensures that the program is meant to ensure that migratory children can access free and appropriate public education, or given the supplemental support they need. They're entitled to meet the same standards that all children do. The Tennessee MEP is the purpose here. It aims to ensure all migratory students reach challenging academic standards, graduate with a high school diploma that prepares them for responsible citizenship, further learning, and productive employment. A little bit about the organization of the Tennessee Migrant Education Program. The Tennessee MEP kind of provides services to migratory children and families through local education agencies, so school districts, both funded school districts and non-funded school districts, and with Arroyo Research Services. So Rachel and I work for Arroyo Research Services. ARS, Arroyo, we determine eligibility for every student in the Tennessee Migrant Education Program. So if you have worked with a student, or if you a student is migrant or migratory in your district, we are the ones that determine them to be migratory. We have an outreach team that makes those determinations every day. After the eligibility is determined, there's a number of school districts throughout the state that receive MEP funds to provide supplemental services to those eligible. And then in addition to that, those not in those enrolled in school in those MEP funded districts, we're providing support to them outside of those.
So Matt,
So
let me say
districts-
something really, really quick, just to kind of hit it on the head here. So again, like I mentioned earlier, like Matt just said, they are trained in McKinney-Vento. And so if they're coming to you and saying like, hey, we have a family that we think is McKinney-Vento, And like I say, in all of our trainings together, if somebody already says they're McKinney-Vento, you automatically enroll them, and then on the back end, you'll go back and say, well, this is not, the family is not McKinney-Vento, but we want that immediate enrollment for every student, including migrant students. And I think that's going to come to, again, making sure your front office staff understand that when Arroyo comes in and says they are McKinney-Vento, we don't question it on the front end. We get that enrollment done, and we come in on the back end and verify that information. It's the same situation for any other student that may be McKinney-Vento. If they say they are, we admit them, and that we do that afterwards.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, our outreach team oftentimes gets a really up close view of a family. We may meet them in their home. We develop a relationship with them very quickly. So that's where some of those determinations may come, that a family may not be presenting themselves as experiencing homelessness, or otherwise the school may not know. But just because of the conversations we have and the things we witness in a home, oftentimes we can make those accurate determinations. These are just a few notes that all Tennessee school districts do for the migrant education program. One is a occupational survey to identify potentially eligible migratory students. So every student in Tennessee fills one of these out every year. That gets sent to our team. We make phone calls. We do home visits to determine eligibility. Provide data on migratory students, in terms of needs assessments, their migrant classifications. We're always keeping track of what the needs are and where the students are throughout the state. And then every district has a migratory or a migrant liaison, much like the McKinney-Vento program. Many people, I imagine, serve both of those roles. But every district has a migrant liaison. They support the recruitment of eligible migratory students in the district. And they also support the service provision of eligible migrant students in the district. So that's kind of what Vanessa is mentioning. When we have a conversation with the family, we find out they may be eligible for McKinney-Vento, they're experiencing homelessness. That's usually like the first person we go to is the migrant liaison in that district, because they're our go-to contact for anything regarding migratory students in that LEA. Just eligibility for the migrant education program can be complicated. There's all kinds of definitions for what it means to be a migratory child and a migratory farm worker. However, we try to boil it down to three things to keep it simple. Migratory just means moving. So you're moving across school district lines within the past 3 years. So going from one place to another within the past few years. Farm workers are fishers. So typically in Tennessee, it's farm work, agriculture work, but it could be work in another state. So, a place on the coast, they could have been a migratory fisher in the past. They moved to Tennessee. They may still have eligibility in the program. And then the last one, eligible for free public education in the U.S. or not yet at the age to be eligible. So basically under age 22, and if you haven't obtained a high school diploma or a HiSET or some equivalent, you're eligible for free public education in the U.S. and for the migrant education program. So some questions we often get on the migratory piece in terms of families moving. Families may move over the summer, over school breaks, or otherwise, have an agreement with the school that they leave for a certain period of time. These may still be considered moves, even if they don't pack up their entire house and leave a home forever. Some families move over the summer because they need to follow a season to make money. So those are just, a question we typically get is, does a move over the summer count? And in many cases it does. Okay, so migratory students, a little bit about eligibility. But basically, this is from the National Center for Homeless Education. They have a whole kind of handout about, how migratory students may be facing homelessness. And, some of the bullets here, I feel like it's really what Rachel and our team sees often. So, every time a family moves, they have difficulty enrolling in school. They could have difficulty enrolling in school. The placement in terms of grade, and, courses that they're taking if they're in high school, there may be a lack of educational records, and that leads to a misplacement. Um, in addition to the educational disruption and the social isolation that comes with moving so often. The one we are really going to talk about today is difficulty enrolling in school. Um, Rachel and I would like to, we're going to just basically give a role play or a scenario, of something that we see often, which is, a family, a migrant family attempting to enroll in school. Rachel, do you want to set the scene for us?
Yeah, like as Matt was saying, in hopes of presenting information that I'm sure you guys have already heard many different times in many different ways. Hopefully this gives a different perspective, just presenting it in a role play fashion. But just to set the scene for where we're in the front of a school building, and especially now with increased security, that interaction typically starts with interacting with the school security system in the front and being needing to be buzzed in. So just to set the scene for that, and then you can start seeing. Hello?
Can I help you?
Hi, I need to talk about um hello?
Yeah, I can't hear you. You may have to speak up.
Oh, sorry. I'm Maria and my son, he needs to go to school. I don't know if can someone help me? Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
the door is open.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay. Good morning. How can we help you?
Yes, I would like to enroll my son Pedro in school.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess we just need a few things. Birth certificate, immunization records, proof of residency. Here, I have a whole list for you. Um, do you have those with you?
Well, so no, I don't have all of these.
Okay. Well, yeah, to enroll in school, you just have to like prove that you live here and a few other things. So, I guess, do you have a utility bill that shows you live in the district?
No, we don't have any bills.
Okay, maybe a lease agreement, like something that shows, you're living where you say you are.
Well, no, it's because we pay cash. It's because we moved. And well,
Yeah, well, I mean, so you can go get a receipt that's on letterhead showing you paid, to live somewhere. And once you have all the paperwork, you can come back here and we can help you out.
I'm sorry, letterhead, notar, what are these?
Go to the place, so like you pay bills to live somewhere, like go there and ask them for a receipt.
Oh, but we paid the other family we live with. But I do have these things. So I have Pedro's birth certificate, and I have his vaccines from the clinic where we went in Florida. Could these things work?
Okay. Um, yeah, so right. I mean, these are good, but no, like birth certificate's good, but we can't take like Florida's documents. It has to be in Tennessee on the Tennessee form. And this information you gave us, it's all from Tennessee. We can't verify that you live in from Florida. We can't verify that you live here in Tennessee in this district with these documents. So like whoever you need to talk to, utilities, your landlord, like go back, talk to them, get the documents, and then if you come back here, we'll enroll Pedro in school.
Oh, but I only have today off of work and I'm not sure what to do.
So, I mean, you have everything you need. Like, take the checklist, find some proof, to say you live here, go to the health department, get the vaccines moved over. You just have to like check off the boxes, go down the list.
Okay. Thank you. I will try. I'll try.
Okay. Yep. Well, I'll go ahead and buzz you out, and once you get those things, we'll come back and we'll be happy to help you.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks to everybody for sitting through that. Do you want to move us forward, Rachel? And yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I just want to add, an additional piece is we wanted for everyone's understanding to conduct this in English. Obviously, a lot of times an additional barrier is also that it's happening in language or in broken English. So just to add that piece as well. But we're really hoping to get your feedback just from seeing this scenario and hear what your thoughts and opinions are. So just a couple of questions to hopefully start discussion is what are some of the issues that you noticed in this scenario? And what might have been done differently to provide a better outcome if you were using this as an example when you're working with your front desk staff? What are some things that you might point out or have to say to them?
So, Rachel, I'll go ahead and get us started. I just listening to your scenario, your role play. One of the things I heard the family say was that they are paying rent to another family. So that would have automatically maybe cued me in to ask more questions about doubled up and maybe helping kind of shift that conversation more to McKinney-Vento. But that's just something I picked up right away when the family mentioned the word living with someone else. They didn't obviously use the word doubled up, but that
Mhm.
flagged for me. Anyone else want to unmute their line or drop their comments or questions in the chat box? I think we have one in the chat box now. Barriers to enrollment were obvious. Yes, they were very obvious. So, anyone want to share, like maybe how this could have maybe gone differently? Like, how are you training your enrollment staff to maybe not have this scenario go this way? Share it in the chat box or unmute your line. Again, it's going to be it's going to be out in the field that are going to be able to really communicate this and really help clarify. I am, not in the field, so I don't experience it daily. So if anyone is comfortable enough dropping something in the chat box or unmuting your line, it'll be a great opportunity. Send someone to the door. Yes, I think that would have been a good way to start the scenario is send someone to the actual door. Rachel, I'll let you. I'm sorry, I'm answering questions here. I'll let you take over.
No,
Apologies.
thank you. Thank you for getting us started. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to start, sending someone to the door to have that human connection. And thank you for pointing out some of those barriers as far as um, them mentioning that they're paying another family, living with another family. Anything else that anyone picked up on? And do you think that front desk staff in your area know not just the terms double up, and those key terms that at district level we might use, but that when you're dealing one-on-one with families who don't always come with the appropriate language to identify the situation that they're in, are they able to recognize those kinds of red flags, so to speak, that don't necessarily have the correct terminology with them?
Again, don't be scared to unmute your line or drop anything in the chat box. This is not, I gotcha. This is a quarterly call so that everyone can learn and that we can serve our students and our families better, and remove these barriers that may be happening. So again, please unmute your line or drop anything you have in the chat box. Maybe it's a question you have based on this skit, but again, unmute your line or drop your scenario questions in the chat box.
So Vanessa, this is Shannon with Washington County. We work to not be quite so concerned about the paperwork for enrollment. If parents are attempting to enroll their child, that's the safest place they can be is with us in a school. So we get them enrolled and we can get a birth certificate or an immunization record from another source or get that after we have them enrolled.
So Shannon, when you are doing your training with your front office staff, are you telling them like they automatically ask about living situation before you even begin the enrollment process? Or is it so that like if the family doesn't have those documents, they know, well, it's probably going to be a situation where the family is more likely McKinney-Vento since they don't have the documents that are required?
And that's one of the things that we are moving to because the McKinney-Vento process of not delaying enrollment, we need to be doing that for all of our students, most especially McKinney-Vento, but we don't need to delay anybody from getting enrolled. But they are trained to ask about living arrangements and doing it in a private, professional way, not to embarrass or intimidate. So it's, that question of, well, are you doubled up? What's the reasoning? And if it is because of a financial hardship, then we, kind of move through that process. But again, we just try to get children in school as quickly as possible.
That's good.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that just brings up, something else with this that could have gone a little bit differently is, as Shannon pointed out, getting to the reason of why. So, the parent shared multiple things about not having different identification paperwork or bills, residency information, but really that next step is let's find out why. Ask those questions, and then in the event that those questions lead to acknowledging that there's homelessness involved, then you'll know to step forward and proceed before getting the documentation first. And if others, feel free to jump in, contribute, but also in addition to, as Vanessa pointed out, yes, sometimes things do not go right. There's barriers that happen across the state, but I do just want to highlight that there's also a lot of things that go really well. I've worked with multiple of you, mostly the ones who are co-migrant as well as homeless liaisons. And I know some districts, they have really great processes in place that as soon as we reach out to you guys, if there is an issue at the front desk level, you're sending folks out to the parent to find out what's going on. I've seen folks do house visits to do paperwork in person, not to call out anyone individual, but Hamblin is a great example of that, where we've called the district and they have an amazing liaison there who's has really good relationships with the families, goes and communicates with them and takes additional steps to help be that bridge between the family and the school. So I just want to emphasize that as well. As much as there are still issues to work through, we're very appreciative of the great work that is also already happening. So on this slide that you'll see here, these are just some of the key issues that were highlighted in our skit, which some of these were pointed out already. So lack of awareness of the McKinney-Vento Act and federal protections for homeless students at the front office. And again, I would suspect that wouldn't be so much lack of the act itself, but it's those more subtle indicators that when folks come and don't have the language to advocate for themselves, being able to identify those language barriers, lack of bilingual staff, complicating communication. I know that's always a big one. There's been so many new languages and cultural groups that have moved to Tennessee in recent years, and it's hard to keep up with that transition sometimes, but it causes issues, particularly for McKinney-Vento and migratory parents who have all of these additional factors complicating, and adding language to the mix is an even bigger barrier for them. Strict adherence to document requirements without offering flexible enrollment solutions, particularly in the use of a checklist, preventing the homeless screener from being completed on the initial school visit. And in the locations, in the schools where there's still been issues that have come up with this is the biggest thing that we've seen. Is it's more about just changing the order of how the interactions take place, so that we're not starting with, as we saw in our role play scenario, here's the checklist. We're going to start with this checklist. If you have these documents, then we'll proceed. If you don't have these documents, then we're going to send you away until you can come back. Because that's kind of the main issue with the McKinney-Vento form being part of the enrollment paperwork. So it's there, it exists to ease enrollment, to make it easier for families to get enrolled. But if they can't get to the step of completing the enrollment paperwork until they go through this checklist phase, it doesn't serve the purpose that it's intended to serve, because they're not getting flagged in order to be able to benefit from not being able to provide the documents, and not being able to provide some of these other things that you might require of a typical enrollment student.
So Rachel, let me say something really quick before we move
Yes.
on. So while McKinney-Vento does not require homeless liaisons to have translators for McKinney-Vento students, it is still a federal requirement that if a family comes in, they can't speak English, that the LEA must provide that translator, and the family does not have to bring that translator with them in order to be able to enroll. So Hannah, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the spot to kind of talk a little bit about that federal law.
Correct. So there are multiple things that address this. OCR, Title VI, or ESL State Board rule, that meaningful participation piece includes having adequate translation for any family that comes in and needs something translated. You cannot require families to bring in their own translator. You cannot ask another parent to translate or a student to translate. It has to be a trained, verified translation. So a lot of you use different companies to do that, and you should be able to call and do that pretty easily. If you don't currently have a language in your LEA, it might be good to talk to somebody and say, okay, what happens if we get a student who speaks Swahili? What's our plan immediately to be able to communicate with that family, since we currently only have Spanish speakers and a Spanish translator?
Thank you, Hannah. I think sometimes that also may hinder the immediate enrollment under McKinney-Vento, as a family does not know the language to be able to say that we are McKinney-Vento, or once maybe they've initially got enrolled and now they need transportation, but for one, they don't know they are entitled to transportation. And if they do, they don't know how to ask for it. They don't know exactly what they need to be asking for to advocate for themselves. And part of it is because lack of McKinney-Vento knowledge. And the second half is a barrier of the English language. So just remember that when you're working with your staff, your front office staff, that they have to be able to provide that for the families.
Yes, thank you for that, Vanessa and Hannah. So this next slide, this data is from the National Center for Homeless Education, and I wanted to share this because and for our students, particularly our migratory students, there happens to be a lot of correlation with also them being newly arrived students. And so this shows just how the face of poverty has changed in recent years. And I would encourage you guys, if when you do trainings for front desk staff. This data could be particularly helpful to include when speaking with them, because over the course of time, it is changed. You'll see here 57% now of students that are living in poverty are foreign born, who have been in the U.S. for 0 to 3 years. 46% foreign born who have been here more than that. And then 42 for native born with at least one foreign born parent. And then 34% for all other native born. So particularly with our migratory students, with poverty being one of the main indicators for homelessness, I don't think folks always, equivalate just, having a migratory student come in and thinking about that correlation between poverty and homelessness, but the data backs up that there tends to be a large correlation between the two. So newcomer families are disproportionately more likely to experience poverty, which is a predictor of homelessness. So I think just having that information for folks to recognize, if I'm dealing with a migratory family, if I'm dealing with just a new arrival family in general, just the knowledge that they are more likely to be in a situation of poverty or homeless. So it's particularly important to ask some of those additional questions to screen at the first contact that you have with them. And also that the same process of determining McKinney-Vento eligibility exists for a newcomer child or youth that is used for a child or youth born in the United States. So those same questions that would be asked for anyone else, regardless of what a cultural norm might be for folks. Because in addition to, if that is a cultural norm to be in a doubled up living situation, for example, but they also are doing so out of economic necessity, just as that would be an eligibility factor for any other student, that would also be an eligibility factor for our newcomer students as well. So this is just some data that we collected from the information that we have for our migratory students here in Tennessee. So there are 524 students that currently have completed individual needs assessment for this school year. And of those, 45 so far have been marked as McKinney-Vento, so about 8.6%. Also, according to records shared from TDOE for the same group of students, there are 49 current MEP students that also have been marked as homeless out of 590 K through 12 eligible. So very similar number there, 8.3%. Since August 2023, we've supported enrollment for 112 migratory children throughout the state, just to emphasize how frequently we see some of these granted. Not all of those are McKinney-Vento enrollments, but a good number of them are. One particular county in Tennessee, as an example, up to 50% of the MEP students there are also identified as McKinney-Vento, according to their migrant liaison. Matt, before we hand it over, did you have anything else that you wanted highlighted for the data particularly?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I think, what we're getting at here is, we're wondering, is there under identification? This particular county, 50% of migratory students there determined as experiencing homelessness. We know this liaison, and he's asking these questions of all the families. So we're looking to get closer to that number throughout the state, which is part of the reason why we're having this conversation now. In addition to just the general kind of eligibility determination for all these families and students throughout the state. Joseph put out a good point in the chat, right after our skit finished, of saying there are obvious barriers to enrollment in this particular skit or this particular scenario. That's true. The we shared this skit though because we see those barriers happening. So, it wasn't a theoretical exercise as much as it was, this is what we're seeing on the ground too. And we've communicated and worked through all kinds of cases similar to this, which you see 112 migratory children here. That was a snapshot in time. Since then, we've helped more. Before that day, we helped more. So, this is something that we're seeing almost every day in the field. I do want to do a quick time check. We want to give Catherine a chance to be able to share. But I know we got started late. So yeah, I'm just curious, Vanessa, what should we aim for as we finish up here?
I think we can go over, but maybe about 5 minutes, like 10:05, since we did start about 10 minutes late. And those who can't stay on, it is recorded and I will have it in e-plan, but for those who can stay, I apologize. I try to always stay within our time frame, but we did get started a little late this morning. So I say like 10:05, if that works for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, that works for us. And just before people do go, maybe I'll put my information in the chat there, and I'm sure Vanessa will be able to share it too. Rachel, if you want to do the same, just in case people go and they have questions they want to send us, right after they leave, that's fine. But otherwise, yeah, Catherine, sorry, we kind of squeezed you at the end here with the time. So if there is a couple things that you really want to highlight on, I can go to those slides. But otherwise, we'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, I do have a hard stop at 11, but if you'll switch to the next slide. Okay. And most everyone on this call, has heard me talk before, so you can move on to the next slide. But I just really want to highlight, and really just appreciate the partnership that we've developed with Rachel. And I think that, as McKinney-Vento liaisons, we are all out doing fabulous things every single day. But it is so nice to have a partner in Arroyo to help us also support those students and families. And so, Rachel is so great to just send very detailed emails, letting me know the student has been, qualified. And as Vanessa said, all the staff is trained on the Arroyo end to determine eligibility. And so it's nice to have, other partners in this work that we know are capable of making all of those decisions, and just, really welcoming the input and connections of families that Rachel can offer. So in our district, we did just this year really turn over the migrant outreach to Arroyo. We had kept it in-house for a couple of years and just really saw that we weren't able to make the connections with the families that the Arroyo team really is able to do. So I think that really just if you are in your community and not necessarily connected with the folks doing the migrant work, day in and day out, just to really know that we've got some great resources and supports. And Rachel can tell you there's lots of times she asks and it's things that are the student is not McKinney-Vento, but I certainly know the resources in our district and our community can help with other things. So I really like, Shannon pointed out early on that, we're all here for the kids, and getting kids in school should be our first priority. And then I think, once they are in school, working with any and available and all willing partners, to ease the struggles that families might experience. And Matt, I don't even remember what the next couple of slides look like, but I think everybody on this call knows the McKinney-Vento rights, identification strategies. Was that the last one? And Rachel touched on Doubled Up, and I, have been a liaison for 26 years. And I can say, for, the very early years of my career, we looked at a lot of our families and said, oh, you live, 15 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, and that's cultural, and we're not going to consider you McKinney-Vento. But I think really, asking those detailed questions that we all know in terms of considering a fixed, regular, and adequate residence. And it sounds like you've got that one county where you've got a great liaison who's really asking that question routinely of all migrants' families. And I think that's just critically important, because if we don't ask these questions and ask them in a way way that indicates we're curious because we have help and support to offer. If we don't ask the questions, families don't necessarily, come up with a way to describe what's going on for them, in a way that's going to, clue us or other enrollment staff into the fact that they might be doubled up. And then maybe there's one more slide. I didn't look at this before this morning. I forgot to get a refresh. Is there one more, Matt?
I may have missed that other slide here.
Okay, that's okay. But no, at this point, I will pause and I will just say, I think, if the liaison from the county with the 50% of MEP kids also designated as McKinney-Vento would like to share anything about that. I just think that we all strive every day to identify any and all eligible students, but I'd be curious if whoever that individual is had anything to add to the discussion.
So I will share, Catherine, I don't believe that is one of the dual roles, that individual has a dual role. So I believe
Okay.
they're only a migrant liaison who has come to that determination by coordinating with the local homeless liaison.
Okay.
So I don't believe they're on the call right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Rachel, if it's who I'm thinking in West, then yeah, it's just a migrant liaison.
Probably so. It is West Tennessee.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Vanessa, for the time. Thanks to everyone for joining, and thank you to Catherine and Rachel. We've been seeing this quite a bit. We wanted to share some of the experiences our team and our families have experienced. So we appreciate the time. And Vanessa, I'll let you finish up here.
Okay. I do have your contact and Rachel's contact on a slide at the end. So that way, again, those who aren't on the call or those who have to leave at 11, they will have your contact information. So just a quick way to identify families. Make sure that you're working in partnership with your migrant liaison. If you are the migrant liaison and you happen to join here and you don't know who your McKinney-Vento homeless liaison is, or vice versa, make sure you're making that effort to know who they are. It takes a village to make sure these families are getting supported. Make sure you're having that professional development and your technical assistance. Make sure your front office staff is really well trained and knowing how to ask these questions to help these families, and having those outreach activities, your housing questionnaires, again, all the things that we talk about in our traditional training for McKinney-Vento. Some options for funding, and this is a big piece. You're like, well, how are we going to fund all these students? You've got your Title IX McKinney-Vento subgrants you can apply for if you are not already a McKinney-Vento subgrantee. Your Title I Part A homeless set-aside can also support these families. And of course, your migrant education program, your Title I Part C, and then local funding, your monetary donations, your in-kind donations, and local grants will all support these students. And then building your relationships. Again, we're not going to go back over that. It's here, but building those relationships with your community, with your staff, with all of your team members, not just your McKinney-Vento program, but anyone that can help you in supporting these families and students. And then Matt mentioned there is a document from NCHE. This is it. You can reach out. It is a McKinney-Vento brief that can kind of help you a little bit with McKinney-Vento and migrant students. And then, of course, always resources that we have for migrants / McKinney-Vento. Any questions? I know we're a little short on time, but are there any questions from the field? If there are questions after this, feel free to reach out to me, Rachel, Matt, or Hannah. We'll be glad to answer anything that you may have. Maybe you just don't feel comfortable asking the question now, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And of course, as always, please give us your feedback if this slide or this webinar was helpful. Without the feedback, I don't know which way to turn our professional development. So please, I'll give you just a minute to look at that. And then I've got one more slide for contact information. But again, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We're here to support you however we can. Here is the contact information. It's got Hannah. Terry Garrett is the MEP consultant for the department. And also Matt's on here and Rachel. So again, please, I can't say that enough. If you have questions, if you're getting some pushback from your front office staff and you need some help, reach out to them or reach out to me. Some of you have had to contact me directly because your front office staff wasn't listening to you and you're like still having enrollment issues, you've given them training and they're still not, following through with immediate enrollment, reach out to me. I'm here to help you guys push through that red tape and get those students enrolled because we got to make sure that your LEA stays in compliance. Again, thank you guys. I'm sorry we went over in time. This is recorded. I will email it and I will put it in ePlan as usual. But I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you, Rachel and Matt, for joining us. And Hannah, we do appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you,
One
Vanessa.
last slide. Sorry, one last slide. Fraud, waste, or abuse. If you feel like any of this slide or any of this call was fraud, waste, or abuse, please call the 1-800 number. And again, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.